welcome to the Comic Corner. My name is Damon. What we do here is news, reviews, and interviews, and today we have a duo, a tag team of brothers co-creating a comic together called RAMGOD, coming out in July. Morgan and Owen Rosenblum. Gentlemen, how are you?
We're great. How are you doing?
Doing well. Something I start the show off every time we have new guests on. Owen, I will start with you. It is our classic. What is your comic book origin story? How did you get into comics, not as a writer, not as a creator, but as a fan?
That is a good question. I would probably say I was like a huge, cartoon, nerd kind of thing growing up. I would say like X-Men and Batman, the animated series, probably really got me into going to like comic shops and everything. Because once I saw that, I was hooked. I was like, superheroes, that kind of fandom, that lore, that community, like, let me in. I want more. So that's probably kind of where that all started. You know, when I was like a real little kid, I was watching cartoons all the time. And then, as Morgan always says, you know, both of us have had a very hard time reading as kids without, you know, any type of visuals that accompany it. We both have ADHD pretty bad. So we were just like, hey, we need something to kind of hold and touch and look at and visually stimulating. That also obviously had deep stories attached to it. And one thing led to another.
Did you have a favorite character?
I probably would say, I think probably Batman and Wolverine. Magneto, I would throw in there too. So yeah, probably that.
Morgan, I know you've been doing the comic creation scene for a hot while, but before that, how'd you get into it? Same as your brother?
Well, yeah, we got into it around the same times. Like our dad, like piggybacking off what Owen was saying, as far as like us not liking to read very much, and just like not being able to focus. So our dad actually like introduced us to comics as a way to get us to sort of like, it's like still reading. There's text obviously there. It's just all the descriptions are actually of like what you're seeing is like the artwork part of it. But that definitely helped us. So he brought us to a comic book store. I remember pretty vividly, and we were like going around, and this was right around when Spawn 1 just came out. And so like that one, it was like advertised everywhere. And I was just like, ooh, this looks cool. The character looked really cool. And then like when they were like, oh yeah, and this guy used to draw on Spider-Man, I was like, oh, cool. And they're like, yeah. And then he branched off and did his own thing. And I was like, oh, cool. So Spawn was probably my first comic. And then I'm like a big Jim Lee fan too. So like, but not just like the original X-Men, arcs that he did, but also like the Wildcats I was really into. That was big for me.
Shout out.
I really like, I could go on all day about like artists and writers that I like in comics, but we got into it at a pretty young age, and and then like it became like our favorite medium as far as like we definitely like TV and movies and things like that too, but that's like a lot harder to make yourself or whatever. Like you see a credit list for a movie or something like that, it's like takes forever. So like getting into comics was like a perfect way for us to write and then visually tell the stories that we wanted to do too. And we love working with I'm an artist myself, but we love working with artists and getting to collaborate because each artist brings something unique to the story itself and like how they perceive it. And it's a really fun experience.
I've heard you say that before, that comics are your favorite medium. You've been doing comics with Dark Rose Studios as a professional, but what is it about? Is it that collaboration that's just like that special aspect to it, or when you are reading it, is there something else too that's just like, this is something only comics can do?
Well, I think if you really break it down, like because like I said, we really like movies and TV and stuff like that, and being it like the comics serve as like a storyboard, right, for a lot of that. So you're really capturing like key moments. Like if you were to just literally like take a screenshot of any show or movie you like, you could turn it into a comic book. And there's a lot of directing that goes into writing and creating comics, because even as you're writing them, for those that don't know, like a comic script is like a movie script, except that it's broken down into pages and panels. Like physically you're trying to communicate to the artist exactly what it is they should be drawing. So you'll be like page 1, panel 1, tight shot on a set of eyes that seem to be studying something ominously. And then shot 2, pull out a little bit wider, but now reverse angle shot from behind someone's head. So we still haven't gotten the character reveal yet. Shot 3, the reveal shot. Now we meet our main character or whatever, and as a voiceover is going on. So like understanding how to write that way was challenging for sure, because it's like, well, do you start just writing thinking in frames, or do you write the whole thing first and then go back and sort of like format it to comics? I generally do the latter. Kind of like as like I finish like a scene, then I'll go back and kind of get an idea for how long it would, how many panels need to be broken up. Do you want to do like a double page spread here? I'm getting into the weeds on this, but yeah.
Yeah, I also think that Morgan kind of brings something interesting up. So my background is in video production, right? So like I produced short form content and commercials and like promos and all that type of stuff for a very long time. And I was dealing with storyboard artists a ton, where I would bring them in and they'd board out like a commercial or like a short film or something like that, because that's what you have. In addition to doing mood boards, which is like visual references and things like that, you're also actually boarding out each scene before you get to set, right?
Not nearly as fun though for like a commercial as it is for like a comic.
No, not even close. And there are different types of artists who do it, and some and oftentimes it's not, you don't find the overlap, the people who do comics and the people who do that type of storyboarding. But what Morgan was talking about, which like when you look at each panel and you separate it out, you see the perspective and the dialogue and what's happening. That part of the video production process really was interesting to me. And then seeing Morgan simultaneously as my big brother get into comics and graphic novels and do that, I started to be like, ooh, like what's he doing? I want to do more of that. And it was just a very interesting visual medium to tell a story and establish source material in, as opposed to like where I was, which was almost like at the end of the spectrum in terms of like, that's where people want to go, where they actually can, put together a set of 50, 60 people and like actually film a short film or something along those lines and adapt the source material to that. So Morgan was kind of in one stage in the beginning, and then I was in the stage at the end in terms of just like establishing an IP and all that stuff. I don't want to get too far down the road, but anyway, I just think it was an interesting match where I was coming from one world and he was coming from the other, and we kind of met in the middle.
That's the beauty about comics, and I go off on this every week when we do our regular show where we review comics. There's just things about comics that make them special that, TV, movies, whatever other medium is, that comics can only do, and that's like the beauty of it all. And what we are here to discuss is your new book coming out in July. Very, very exciting. A long time coming. We'll get into that.
Oh, yeah.
RAMGOD Cyberpunk. Already sold on. I love Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk stuff is always cool because it's like almost like a genre that you like is slightly tapped into, but we haven't like fully really gone into everything that a Cyberpunk world can be. Morgan, how would you describe this version of a Cyberpunk world with RAMGOD? What sets this one to be different?
So, like you were just saying, like we feel like the Cyberpunk genre as a whole is kind of untapped, and we always like, like a plausible future with like using technology to kind of integrate itself as it's been doing into our world, but then also finding other ways to really ground it and keep it relevant. So like our goal with this story was to create a very lived in world that like you were like, yo, that's totally plausible and very realistic, but also, sci-fi enough where you can kind of like suspend your disbelief and have some fun with it. So RAMGOD is actually the name of a sport that's introduced in the near future, and maybe not the near future. It's supposed to be like 2085 or something like that. But where the world had gone in the direction of like VR and augmented reality and stuff, and then like pretty much backtracked and was like, nah, that's killing our societal our ability as a society to be productive, and people stopped taking care of their health and stuff. So like the government and the world needed to find a way to like get people to be more present in like real world stuff.
It's kind of like Damon, if you think about it, like WALL-E meets Ready Player One, like that was like, if those two things were to kind of mesh together, it was like, nah, this doesn't work. Like people are too plugged in, they're like, there's a lack of contribution to society in a certain way. So we got to unplug them and like give them something, a reason as why they want to be unplugged, and hence our world. So continue, Morgan. I'm sorry.
Yep. So anyway, the story follows the main character's name is Clint Buller, who's this 35-year-old like patrolman cop, the guy in the middle there, right? And he's like a former superstar collegiate athlete that you find out was like drafted #1 to the NFL 15 years ago. But like due to some nefarious implications to like the Chinese mob and like other people that in like crime syndication, he was never like officially indicted, but it like messed up his reputation so that no sponsor or league would touch him. So he had to pretty much like completely go a different direction and wound up, being a cop of all things. And fast forward 15 years later, the guy's kind of like hasn't done anything with his life compared to what he was supposed to become. He's like a dad that has like split custody sort of his son, Malcolm, who's on the far left over there. He's 15 years old, and he only gets to see him like one weekend a month because Malcolm generally lives with his stepmom his mom and his stepdad, who like kind of poison Malcolm against his dad a little bit, and maybe rightfully so because he's not particularly a great dad when we meet him in the story. And he doesn't know how to connect to his kid at all. But his kid is obsessed with this brand new sport called RAMGOD, which is like in its second or third year in the league, but it's definitely new and it's like taking over. And his favorite, there's 8 teams in the sport of RAMGOD, and 7 of them are all like run by big corporations, right? And owned, and like that's how like they can afford to like use the expensive, like create the expensive gear that they use and in the sport. Because it's kind of like we always say, it's like American Ninja Warrior meets like Formula One racing meets.
Yeah, you got like that Red
UFC.
Bull element in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's three. We call them heats. There's 3 different like events through the sport, right? And it's racing. That's one heat. The second one is combat, like fighting, and then the last one is climb or descent, right? You either got to go up or down. And the courses though also change. So sometimes if it's racing, it's like it might be like monster truck, like demolition derby, like twisted metal style kind of racing, or it could be like jet moto or like motorcycles through tight little alleyways with the courses constantly like rotating and changing throughout. And then like same goes for combat, right? Like it could be like a one-on-one match to where you have like armor on and things and you have to just do as much damage as humanly possible, or it could be like a WWE Royal Rumble style thing where all 8 teams are competing and the ring just drops out and gets smaller and smaller as the event goes on, forcing players to get closer together. So just to give you a kind of idea like what we get to play with in here. And then the climb is something that we had a lot of fun with, where at first we're like, oh, so it's like first to the top of like a skyscraper. Yeah, that's cool. But what if it's also like you have to descend down an active volcano, or like an avalanche will be triggered halfway through the descent or something like that. So that gave us like a lot of cool courses.
Like the American Ninja Warrior component. We're creatures of nostalgia here. So there used to be a show called Guts, or like Global Guts.
I was just about to bring that up. It sounds like there's so much guts in there. Yes.
I'm happy that you're on that wavelength. So like we were huge Guts fans, and it was
yes.
Like, do you have it? Do you have it, Guts? So we were just like the crag that was in that.
Yeah, we call like our mountain the crag.
Yeah,
like, based off.
So we were like paying homage to it. So we were just like, you know what? Like, what if they did like a high tech version of that? There's like a little bit of that like Maze Runner kind of component in it, and we were like, well, what if they like had something like that? And we just thought like, let's pull that thread.
And so, what's cool though is that like everyone had like there's on every team. There's 4 players when the league starts. Ultimately, it becomes 5, which is like the inciting incident of the story. But anyway, it's 3 humans and 1 bot. You can only have 1 bot on your team because like at first the league was like, oh well, we can go as dangerous as we want if we have bots because we're not worried about them, getting destroyed or whatever. But then people stopped really caring about them because like nobody cares if like a non-human gets hurt. So they're like, all right, well, I guess we can have 1 bot to go a little crazy, and then they can pick and choose which players they assign to certain heats and things like that. So you can, as a team, you can like choose which of your players are competing in which events, right? And there's 3 heats, but there's 4 players, so like you can mix and match them, which is kind of cool. Anywho, as the seasons went on, right, what you find out is that now entering the 3rd year, all teams now have to add a 5th player to their team, which is how we bridge the Clint story and then the RAMGOD story. So as I mentioned before, 7 of the 8 teams are all corporate funded, right? And sponsored. Whereas 1 team is the people's team, the Barracudas. That's Malcolm's favorite team. They're actually like funded through like a Patreon or a crowdfunding type of system where fans of the team literally like kind of donate money to it. But what we find out is that they're secretly moonlighting as bank robbers, the Barracudas are, in order to fund their operation, and they launder the money through the crowdsourcing platform, right? Now, with the new league year requiring that all teams now have to add a 5th player, the Barracudas need to make sure that they add a good athlete to help them win, but then B, someone that like they can trust in their inner circle that will probably be participating in some of their criminal activity. And so around this time, Clint who has like a checkered past, both from like, you know, his ties to crime, and then also the fact that he was once like he was like LeBron James of football. He, like around this time, like a viral video of him comes out of him like chasing a perpetrator, and it makes the evening news, and like kind of puts him on the Barracuda's radar. And so like they invite him to a tryout, and I'll stop there. But ultimately, the story is really about a father and son trying to connect with son, and there's a big redemption arc, because he's not a great dude. He's got a lot of potential, but like kind of gets he's on his own worst enemy a lot. And so this is like an opportunity for him to reconnect with his kid, because if he gets invited to join his kid's favorite team, that's probably going to bring him closer. But at the same time, if he's also like encouraged or persuaded to partake in some of their, you know, criminal activity, then he's kind of doing some bad stuff himself, but B, also potentially implicating his kid in all this and pulling him into that world. So there's like a big moral dilemma between what he should do the more he gets like into that world. And that's the world of RAMGOD.
I could tell you guys put a lot of effort into the world of the sport itself.
Oh yeah.
So did you big sports fans for both of you, I assume, because you put a
honestly, I'm just like personally, I just love the NFL. I like basketball. I like the basketball again now that the Knicks are good. Again,
Yeah,
but
I was gonna say, I'm probably more of a basketball fan than I even am a football fan. Morgan is like diehard Jets all the way. So there's definitely like the sports component here. We always thought was just I don't think you see that as much in comics nowadays. And it was something that we really wanted to incorporate into our series and our world, but we didn't want to just make it obviously about that and have it hyper focused on it. And as you read the series, like, yeah, it's an important component, but it is not the component.
I would say it's like one of three main sort of like avenues of the series. There's RAMGOD the sport, which is fun, and the action in that's really cool too. Because like, for example, human or bot, you all have like different suits that you wear, right? And the suits are all like the gear, it's all like tricked out with like a bunch of different cool boosts. So you could have like a jetpack, you can have like, you know, missiles and all this other kind of stuff that you might, you know, use to your advantage. However, they are all locked when the event begins, and you can only unlock them sort of like Mario Kart or Hunger Games-esque, where like you have to find them or get like you earn them, and then they unlock inside of your suit so that you can use it.
Yeah, so it's a competitive advantage unlock. That's why we call it like a boost, and they can kind of where our sport is like the Olympics, where it's like it's a point-based system. We like the fact that like as your players from different teams are competing, acquiring a boost allows you basically to either use it in your current competition in Heat or apply it and have it carry over to the next competition, which can be going on simultaneously to give your teammate a competitive advantage over them. And that's something that Morgan and I really liked, at the fact that if you maybe didn't like racing, but you like combat, or you like combat and you like climb, like you could apply that to the other thing maybe that you don't like as much, and for viewers, and they could tune into that type of thing.
For better context or more clear of like an example of that. So like we imagine like just watching NASCAR. I'm not a huge NASCAR fan. I've always wanted to get into it, but I just watching them go around in circles. But there's like moments, like when you watch the highlights and stuff for like NASCAR, you're like, oh, that's cool. Like what an awesome moment. So we thought, wouldn't it be kind of cool if you could like almost turn your attention to like a boxing match or like a fight going on, but if that fight was somehow connected to the race, you're like, how is that possible? Well, what if your fighter could earn points for you that would give you like NOS, like, you know, like the jet fuel kind of thing, based on how much damage your teammate did in the ring. So like, we're like, that would be freaking cool. So if like you were in last place and you had no chance of like catching up, well, you could have a chance, because if your teammate's kicking ass in the ring, they give you like additional boost to your car, and now all of a sudden you can catch up. So like we played a lot with that element, and we had a lot of fun with that. So that's the one avenue is the RAMGOD sport. The second one is like the bank robbery crime aspect of it. We liken our story a lot to like Fast and the Furious, or like the original Point Break with Keanu, where, you know, it's like there are surfers that were moonlighting as bank robbers, or you know, racers moonlighting as bank robbers. The difference in our story though is like, obviously it's in the cyberpunk setting and it's a new sport, but the cop in our story has no idea that he's not like undercover trying to find these people. He's like, so that's like that. It's almost like he's not in the know at all during this whole thing, which we thought was kind of a cool aspect of it. Not only that, but he's got a dark past himself, which is kind of cool.
Right. like they try to exploit and whatever. We like our flawed and our anti-heroes protagonist kind of thing. But something that we were talking about that exists, I think, in Cyberpunk, and something that, as you said before, we put a lot of thought into the world, into the sport specifically, are the corporate sponsors who are like the owners of each team. And we were trying to be like, well, what if like the most powerful companies on the planet each own like a team, right? It's like if they each owned an NFL team, right? Like kind of how would that shape things? And it was like, what if like Apple, the equivalent of Apple, owned a team, the equivalent of Amazon owned a team, the equivalent of McDonald's owned a team, equivalent of like Nike or Ferrari owned a team, like these type of things. It just was something that we really wanted to mess around with. So as the series continues, you'll, I think, really understand how much thought we put into the sponsors.
Just layers upon layers upon layers of stories, different avenues you can then take, which is just really fascinating because that's how you're able to prolong a story, right? And one of the things when I was just going through this is like the art and the colors here from Kanan and Red are phenomenal. They did an excellent job. And Morgan, you mentioned it earlier on that one of your favorite aspects of comic creation is like that collaboration, right? Were they able to bring anything to table like, oh, that's a great idea, and you're able to implement that into your story?
Oh, absolutely. So Kanan does this technique that he uses a lot where he bleeds panels into one another, or he like overlaps stuff. You can kind of see a little bit on this page, but where like some of the insets kind of bleed over the next one. But there, if you go, do you have like one of the fighting shots teed up?
Just these four.
Just those, okay. Because you'll see in some cases there's like someone doing an uppercut and he like almost like breaks out of the panel in the other one. That's something that I don't see all the time. Certain artists just kind of stay inside their windows or in their lanes. Kanan like really tells these dynamic stories, and honestly, so does Henry Persetia as well, who's one of the other artists that works on the series. And everyone brings something a little bit different. Ren's colors speak for themselves. Like we found him, I think, right as he was entering like the comic space. Like he obviously has like superstar talent, but didn't have a whole lot of credits to his name. But when we saw it, like we didn't need the credits to validate how good his work was. We were like, this guy's awesome. So we had to do a test page, and then that only just further confirmed what we already knew, which was this guy's a rock star. And specifically, the two partnered together were fantastic, because that's something that we always do as well. Like it's like if you were to bring an actor in, like a big name actor, you'd be like, oh well, like they should read. Like they get insulted sometimes. So you hear if you ask them to like try out or read for the part, like, well, you know what my acting chops are, and you'd be great, yeah, but like it's still good to see like you practicing in that role for a moment. So taking that over to like this, like having our colorists actually do a test page on our line artists line work to see how those look together. That just like further, you're like, cool, now I'm going into this project knowing that this is a freaking awesome match. And so we did that with like the whole art team throughout the pre-production process to make sure that like we knew what the final product was going to look like before we went full steam ahead. So a lot of planning goes into this thing. So the colors from Ren are fantastic. Kanan's line work is incredible. So is Henry Prasatia, who does. We broke. There's 6 issues in total. 3 of them are done by Kanan, and then 3 are done by Henry. And we divided it by like in season and off season of RAMGOD, because half the story in issue 1 takes place like when the season's going on, and then it goes into the off season, which is like when the team has to find another player. So you're in that off season, then we kind of change art style. So like it's same color, so it definitely has the same consistency, but the art style I think also visually tells you, oh cool, we're back, RAMGOD's season starting up again, or it's ending, which is kind of fun. And then Damon, we had a third artist that we assigned exclusively to flashback scenes, who does his own colors, where you'll see, I think the first one's in issue 2 or 3.
That's a Morgan special.
Yeah, I love doing that, where I always like I have like a different artist do the flashbacks, just to make it's not just like a different colorist, it's like the whole everything feels like it's from a different time or like a different perspective. So that was a lot of fun too. And then our letterist, Nahi, Ismail Naha, but he goes by Nahi. We've been working with it. He was the first like letterer that I think I ever worked with in comics, and he wasn't a letterer to begin with either. Because like for anyone that doesn't know, like my background in comics, I've been writing professionally, comics professionally for like over a decade now. But I didn't like just get a start working for like a major publisher or comic. I produced my own. I saved up my some money, and then paid an artist, Ray Dillon, to paint the first 10 pages of a script I wrote, and then launched a Kickstarter, and then like that got me going to where cool, okay, now I'm starting to learn this, and my friends and family are now like aware of my real passion because they saw me drawing as a kid and writing and creating stuff, and one thing led to another, and after a while I started getting a little bit better to where other, you know, comic publishers were like, yeah, we want to have you come write for us. So
exactly. We also messed around with the margins here, Morgan, if you want to tell them.
oh yeah, so this is interesting. When we initially started this comic, it was supposed to be like a magazine, like in Heavy Metal magazine, which is a wider format and larger. So like once we ultimately wound up making a switch to a single issue comic format, like the page sizing, it's not just like the sizing, the dimensions were different, proportions were different.
Yep.
So the options were either cut off the corner or like the edges, which was going to like get rid of beautiful artwork and then kind of mess with everything, or it would be add like black, you know, filler to the top and bottom, which we were like, no. But it wound up being a blessing in disguise because our genius letterer found a way to like add more story elements to those margins by like really making you feel like you were in the world. So every page has like a unique UI element to it that helps to reinforce what's going on in the scene in some ways. So if you like flip backwards or forwards to where you can see, we were talking about boost before. At the top, you can actually see like how many boosts each team has active and remaining, and then at the bottom it like lets you know like who's in the lead and things like that, so that like it's giving you additional cool context that you won't have to flip back to like find out.
Yeah, kind of like cool like video game UI kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that was like a really fun way for us to sort of turn a problem into like turn a con into a pro kind of thing. So
it's like an on-screen score bug in like any other sport, right? It tells you who has the ball, who's leading, who has possession. Now you're able to take advantage of that extra space and have that with you all the time. Like you said, you don't have to back up, keep going, have like a little context panel in there that's taking up space that you could be using to tell your story. Now you're able to have that on screen all the time. That is genius right there. That is great.
That's all.
I also can't even imagine like not having that anymore, where it's like, okay, no, we're just going to be doing this going forward. Kind of thing.
And it's not, by the way, Damon, it's not just in the sport. So like when they're in like a bank robbery scene, it'll be like silent alarm triggered. Like, you know, like little things like that really help. Or if there's like a police, you know, report, like we got a code 411 in progress, like perpetrator scene going down Washington Street, like you'll have that kind of stuff throughout. And it changes, like the colors change based off of it. Like even the logos in the bottom, like you're in RGSN right now, which is like RAMGOD Sports Network, like our ESPN that we made up. It changes based on, you know, where you are. And sometimes it'll let you know if like you're entering like a unsafe area, like in downtown New City or something like that. It'll be like, you know, like mass strongly advised, air quality low, you know, risk for lung damage and things like that.
Further world building stuff that we threw in there, we sprinkled it in.
That's great. I really love how you mentioned that you're able to use different artists to your advantage, right? Because a lot of times we have an ongoing series in comics. Sometimes you need an artist to come in to fill in for an issue or two, and then maybe it could take you out of the story because you're in the middle of an arc, you're starting a new arc, and then it just feels different. When you're able to do that to your advantage, like you said, for a flashback scene, or to emphasize this is the off season, so it's a little less, you know, it's a different look, but it still has the same colors, so you're able to stay within the world. It doesn't take you out of the story. You're using it to your advantage, which I think is, you know, great planning on your part, and also just helps further your, you know, in story universe that you're able to tell. It just works from every different angle. So kudos to you for thinking about that. Last thing before we wrap up, and I asked this for everyone, but it's what advice do you have for anyone who's like trying to get into the comic space as a writer, as a creator, however you want to get into it? Would you give to someone being like, I really want to do this? What would you say?
I think two key things. One is learn about long form like series writing as opposed to just one issue kind of thing. Like you research series, like comic series Bibles, and like that's like a roadmap for you or a blueprint to help you as a writer, because you may have a great scene or a cool character in mind, but like one character is not going to be or one scene obviously is not going to be enough to like carry a full story and make it feel like it's got a real arc to it. Series Bible planning will really help you understand your own story and then fill in the kind of the missing parts that you maybe didn't know you needed, or maybe you did know you didn't. You couldn't like identify. That'll help you there, because planning I think is everything. I also was the former managing editor of Heavy Metal magazine, where I was like I had submissions always coming in from different writers and artists and things like that. Artist is a little bit more straightforward because you're visually looking at what you can kind of tell from looking at it. Is the storytelling good? Is the paneling, like where's the camera placement? Is it dynamic? Is it interesting? Does it create the mood that we're going for? Is it conveying the proper pacing and storytelling? But then when the writing aspect of it, that's more homeworky in my opinion, meaning that the person who's evaluating is really, it's more than just a quick look, like where they open up like an email and, oh yeah, you can get it a quick assessment. Yeah, that guy's good or not. You actually have to kind of like, you might be 10 pages in and be like, yeah, that was a waste of my time. That person's not ready to be a writer yet. And I say not that they can't write, just not ready. Because I think anybody can learn enough to become a good writer. I mean, obviously there's like a creative intuition that you may have or may not, but you can definitely refine your skills in that regard. So that's part one, right? Like planning, understanding the structure of storytelling, and like creating a series, whether it's a mini arc or ongoing. But the other one too is like, it's going to be tough to penetrate the industry without any credits. It's just, there's not a whole lot of opportunities. So I would say like, save up a little bit of money, and then do maybe what I did, which is like pay an artist, unless you are the artist. If you're the artist, great. But if you're not, or if you are the artist and you need a writer, like try to find someone that you admire that you think would do your story justice. And then, put a Kickstarter out, or like find a way to get it out there where you can showcase what you've done so far, and then ask for help from the community of other people that like the same kind of stuff. And it also helps you get good at like sort of creating a business plan and like showing like, this is my intention, this is how I'm going to get to where I want to go, and this is what it's going to look like. Because that's what got me started. And I definitely don't think I would have ever had it like, been writing for Dark Horse or Massive or Simon & Schuster, Penguin Random, whatever it is, like without having done it myself and taken that leap early on.
Yeah. I think kind of to add to that, because obviously coming from my background being a producer, I'm all about like pre-production and the meticulous planning and assembling like what I always says was like a crew, right? Which was my crew for film. But this would be my team, my art team, my design team, all of that type of stuff. And, making sure that you have the right people work at complementing each other and speaking to each other's strengths and weaknesses and whatnot. And something I learned along the way in doing this is like, no one's a mind reader, right? So Morgan and I always stress, I'm not the artist, right? So having an artist or artists understand my creative vision, I have to be very explicit, and I have to provide them with visual references that coincide with the actual script. And I always say like the importance of like mood boards and like really showing, don't tell them what you kind of want, so that they understand what your vision is, so that you can more easily get aligned.
I feel like at some point we're gonna like actually release the original like mood board. It's really just like our pitch Bible or whatever you want to call it, pitch deck, where like credit to Owen here, because it made it. I when Owen first came to Owen, this was like Owen's idea to begin with, right? I was working on a bunch of other stuff. It was around, like COVID was going on. I was playing Cyberpunk 2077, and he was like he had just watched like the new Blade Runner. I mean, so did I. But anyway, he's like, I have an idea for something, and I was like, all right, well, make sure like you can pitch me, but like take your time, think about it, and like put something together so that like it's really
he
well thought
basically
out.
said, I'm not going to take you seriously and give you preferential treatment as your brother. You need to sell me. And he was even more critical, I think, than he would have just been a normal person, because that's the way we work. We're always like, check your ego at the door. Best idea wins, period. Doesn't matter who it's coming from.
So the mood board that he put together, where he was like, I envision a world that's like this. And then it was like, this is kind of the city vibe that I have. And he had a bunch of like Pinterest board pictures, but they were very, well organized in a way that like I could understand the feel for this. And he's like, and there's these big, like, imagine these skyscrapers, but instead of them being like just like a building or an office building, they literally are a giant ventilation system that cleans like the air in the polluted city. And I was like, oh, and he's like, but they're only in the rich neighborhoods. Like the bad neighborhoods, they have like old school filters that don't work well. Right, that like the secondhand versions of those. I was like, okay, this is cool. And he's like, and like how people wear masks because of COVID. Well, now it's full helmets because like they can't let their skin get exposed in certain areas. And I was like, okay, I'm digging this world kind of thing. Like it's coming together.
It always made me think of that. I think it was a commercial in the original RoboCop where it's like for suntan lotion, I think. and it was like blue suntan lotion because like the atmosphere was so harsh, and it always just made me think of like that type of, you know, that type of world, and that type of like we're depletion of natural resources. And as we said, I created this and with Morgan in the time of the pandemic, and we were like, I don't think this is going away. I think with the way that, you know, science and technology and experimentation is going, like we're just gonna have more of these. So we're gonna have to figure a way to how to survive in a world and adapt in a world of this type of stuff. So yeah, that's kind of where RAMGOD was born.
Brilliant stuff, gentlemen. Thank you so much. That once again, you can pick this up in your stores in July. There's many different variants. These are just 3, and I saw one of them was a David Mack cover, and I was like, holy crap, a David Mack cover, and it's gorgeous.
There's 2 versions of it too, or maybe even 3. There's that one, and then there's another one without like all the paneling. It's just the artwork itself with like without the little boxes and stuff. And then they have like a foiled version of it too, which is pretty cool. So, and like I think there's maybe 8 to 10 different variants for issue 1, and like, you know, hopefully 20 years from now, 30 or whatever, like those will be worth a lot of money. So what I would say is like pick your favorite or pick your favorites, grab a couple of them. You know, I don't think they're too expensive, and it's an issue 1 of what seems to be a pretty cool series that thus far the reviews we've been getting and the feedback has been like, yo, this is awesome. Like, is it going to go beyond 6 issues? And the answer is we freaking hope so, because we wrote it to go well beyond that. But it, you know, issue 1 sales is definitely going to help define that. So the more that we can you know, generate sales and get the word out about RAMGOD, the more of the story we can share with you guys.
Gorgeous covers. I mean, look at that. You got a David Mack cover, you got me sold immediately, because it's just absolutely gorgeous. We have the Diamond code here on screen. If you're listening to us on Spotify, we have the Diamond code also in the description. We have a link to it in the description. Go order it at your local comic shops or wherever you get your digital comics as well. There's a lot of different places, but make sure you go order it, go pick it up, because there are so many books, so many covers, and this book just genuinely looks really good. Can't wait to read it like physical in my hand. It's gonna be great. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
At Dark Rose Studios is that's like our company. It's like our IP studio. Where, and by the way, so like RAMGOD is just one of several different original stories or series comics that we've created. We have another one. We have I think like 4 or 5 other main ones, but this one, Winds of Numasera, it's like dark fantasy, kind of like Game of Thrones meets Lord of the Rings, with a little Pan's Labyrinth and never-ending story in there. But you know, for an adult audience, and we turned it into a board game. I've been working on this baby for the last 5 years alongside the graphic. Now the graphic novel's out, by the way. It came out through Dark Horse, so you can go get that anywhere you want. On our website though, at windsofnumasera.com, which I think I'll just put in the chat, that you can read the first 2 chapters of Winds of Numasera for free. It's available, and I'm like gonna learn a little bit more about that series if you know you're into dark fantasy or you just like this kind of stuff that we seem to come up with. But we're launching a Kickstarter in a couple weeks for the board game, and there's gonna be some really cool exclusive stuff. We're also doing, and this is the kind of the bridge between the two. Well, obviously the Dark Rose Studios is the main, you know, concentric circle, but we're doing we have a special stretch goal teed up that merges the 2 worlds, sort of, where we're going to be doing like this special poster from our amazing artist Philip Cruz, where he's going to draw the like Clint and Elsa as like in the fantasy, in like a different setting. So it's going to be those characters, but in the Winds of Numasera, like medieval armor instead of in their cyberpunk stuff.
How do we bring our RAMGOD characters into the Winds of Numasera world in like a cohesive way? And we were like,
without actually necessarily putting them into the story, it's more just like, oh, badass. I love that. Like, I get it. Like, this is what they would look like if they were characters in that story. So yeah, so check out, you know, windsofnumasera.com too if you're into that. And then on the internet, you said like, where else can you find us? So darkrose.io or darkrosestudios.com, either will take you to the same place. And
all of our socials are linked there.
Yeah, you can find everything from there, and take a look at some of the other stuff we got going on, where you can like subscribe to our newsletter and stuff, and you know, keep supporting indie creators, because we're like, while the website may make it seem like we're some big company like Skybound, like nope, we're like 3 people, and then a couple of like other, you know, core team members that like are doing this like
internationally.
international. Yeah, but I mean, like we're not rolling in dough or anything like that. Like we're using everything we have to put into our content to make it really special.
Totally. And that's been a long time coming. Like we put years and years of our lives into this stuff. And like summer 2024 is like finally where we're releasing these things. This is my first time writing and creating something of like this nature. Morgan obviously has been in the comic and graphic novel space forever. But for me, this is my first thing. So when you were talking about getting your hands on the hard copy, dude, bro, same. So like that will be a key moment for me in terms of holding in my hands the first thing that I've written and created in this space, to be like, yes, finally. So many years of my life went into this, and now I get to see not only what it looks like in person and in the flesh, but also see how fans and readers respond to it.
Can't wait to hold it in my hands because it's just
Damon.
a gorgeous, gorgeous book. Such a cool world. You guys put so much time, so much effort into this. Like you said, 4 years at least in the making for this to come. So this is
labor of love. That's what you got to do. You asked about advice to people, perseverance, and do not just take no for an answer. And we're very like everyone's always, like, what's your plan B? What's your plan B? We're Mamba mentality, as Kobe Bryant said, like plan A all the way. So yeah. I don't know. Life is short, so do what you love. Love what you do.
Do what you love. Tell the stories that you love. And I, again, can't wait to get this in my hands. Everyone, go get this when it comes out in July. Go to your comic shops. Go order it with the Diamond code. However you go to your comic shops, however you order your books, just make sure you add this one to the list because it's going to be great. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about RAMGOD and everything else you have going on. You can find me on Twitter at Damon Tweet. You can find the show on Twitter at Comic Corner Pod. You can find us on TikTok at Comic Corner Pod as well. And make sure, as always, to check out everything Agents of Fandom on the socials at Agents Fandom, Twitter and TikTok. Agents of Fandom everywhere else because we have so much content coming out on the weekly. It is absolutely crazy. House of the Dragon talk, My Adventures with Superman talk, everything. Star Wars, Andor, this and that. If you're into it, we're talking about it. I guarantee you there.
Right.
We also have our regular show every Thursday where we talk comics. We do reviews, news, and interviews on the show. And we, of course, talk indie comics as well as the big two. But indie comics always get a special spot in the show. And I guarantee you in July, when this comes out officially, we will be giving you our full thoughts on this as well. That'll do it for this issue of the Comic Corner. Make sure you go to your local comic shops. Make sure you go pick up some comics and read some comics. And until next time.